What was the scariest moment you had as a Blue Angel?
Got distracted at the bottom of a loop, took my eyes off the altimeter by an airliner out to my right. And when I looked back, I looked at the altitude and I looked at the water and I thought, well, the fear jumps in there to take over. If you can dissolve fear in admitting to your own errors and promising to correct them, that's when you'll do really well.
So it's authentic to say, you know what, I screwed up, and to own it.
It was all about vulnerability. The trust was so important within the team, interpersonal trust. And they trusted me. I trusted them.
How do we develop trust to come to even like 10% of a Blue Angel?
I think you have to.
Hi, I'm Mark Divine, and welcome to the Mark Divine Show. Thanks so much for being here today. On this podcast, I speak to some pretty extraordinary people doing uncommon things, bringing positive things into the world that are unique. I'm excited today to talk to Greg, the boss, Wooldridge, three-time fight leader of the Blue Angels, the only time that there's been a three-time leader. He also took the team to Moscow, which is an interesting experience. Executive producer of the new IMAX movie, The Blue Angels, picked up by Amazon. He's an expert on second chances, and he ran for governor in Oregon in 2018. He's an encourager, problem solver, and a challenge taker. I'm super stoked to have Greg, the boss, Wooldridge, on the Mark Divine Show. Greg, so excited to have you here on the Mark Divine Show. Appreciate you, brother.
Well, glad to be here, Mark.
I knew you were going to say that. Glad to be here.
There you go, tagline.
You know, your friend John Foley, which is how we got together, Blue Angel himself, that came out of his mouth probably like 150 times last time I saw him in Harvard. What a great guy.
He was one of my wingmen.
Is that right? Yeah. Tell me, what was the scariest moment you had as a Blue Angel?
Oh my! I don't think it had to do with flying. No, I don't know.
Whether you were going to get in or not.
Yeah. No, I think things that happened to the people that I worked with, my troops.
Right.
Sometimes car accidents and things like that really, really scared me. I had a couple of flying things. I got distracted at the bottom of a backside of a loop and took my eyes off the altimeter in the pull by an airliner out to my right in Hawaii inside our 5-mile circle. And when I looked back, I looked at the altitude and I looked at the water and I thought, well,
I'm too close.
I'm going to give it a pull here and see what happens, right? And just pull real hard. And that got my attention.
I bet you that did. Holy cow.
That was kind of scary.
You can't lose your attention for even a second, can you?
No, sir. No, especially if you're leading, if you've got wingmen, you've got the responsibility for their lives and for them as well as your own. And you and I talked a little bit ahead of time about the team and the trust. We didn't talk about trust, but trust was so important within the team, interpersonal trust. And they trusted me. I trusted them.
I 100% agree. We talk a lot about that in the SEALs. Developing trust, the way we do it it's got to have similarities, but also differences. But just as a backdrop, I've been in business now for years, far longer than I was in the Navy. You probably didn't know this, but my Navy career I was one of those reserve guys. I did 10 years active, 10 years reserve, retired as a commander. So while I was a reservist, I was in business. So I've got more time in business, and trust is something that's hard to come by in business. It's pretty elusive. It's the glue that holds us together in the teams, right?
When you leave the military, I think you have to adapt to a new level of trust, and it may not be where you used to be.
Yeah, but is there any way, like someone listening to this was going to say, that sounds right, Greg. Yeah, but how do we develop trust, to come to even like 10% of a Blue Angel, diamond formation?
Well, I think we would say, taking on the Blue Angel model, that you develop in yourself a sense of gratitude, and that gratitude radiates, right? People want to be around people that are happy and have a sense of appreciation for what they get to do and what life is all about. That is a good
Is gratitude a learned thing, or is it inherent? I mean, the glad to be here, does that really, just by saying that every day, does that make people more grateful?
No, you have to practice it. You have to walk the talk. You have to get out there and reflect that sense, and you have to wake up to it. And I don't mean wake up. I mean actually physically in the morning, if you can. The place where it gets me is in the middle of the night. The worry wart salts, the worry bugs start
to. Yeah, the 2 a.m. sweats. Yeah.
Yeah, and you just wake up and you go, okay, you got a lot to be thankful for. Let's let's weigh this in balance, and also the fact that at 2 o'clock in the morning you can't do anything about it, so let's weigh this, but steep it in a sense of balance and gratitude. And if you can carry that with you into the day, and there are a lot of reasons why I have a great sense of gratitude. One is second chances, having had a cardiac arrest that should have killed me.
Oh, wow.
Other sectors that I got through things that should have been pretty bad. And I have gratitude for those second chances. And so, can you go back to your original question, Mark? Are you born with it? Can you just have it internally all the time? Sometimes you run into happy people and you go, well, how come they're so happy? What do they have to be happy about? And I think you have to develop that sense on your own, and hopefully you have things that you can be happy about. But how do you learn to weigh what you have to tamp down the things that would make you unhappy? One of the things you can do is surround yourself with good people.
Mm-hmm. For sure. Hey everyone, this is Mark Devine, founder of SealFit, Unbeatable Mind, and I'm super stoked to announce that my new book, Uncommon, is due out from St. Martin's Press this summer, July 16th. And we've launched a pre-order campaign. You can learn more about that at readuncommon.com to try to get early awareness for the book, which I hope will help a lot of people, where I go and do a deep dive on the 5 mountains of personal mastery: physical, mental, emotional, intuitional, and spiritual. Uncommon, simple principles for an extraordinary life. Check it out at readuncommon.com, and thank you for your support and being part of the change that you want to see in this world. Hoo-yah, Divine out. What role did the debrief play in developing trust for you guys?
Huge. I like to call it the way the team debriefed, with the boss, the CEO coming in and saying, there was a pretty good day out there today when we flew the practice or air show. A little bumpy here and there, but overall I thought we did okay. And here were my mistakes, right?
Right. You start with yourself. Yeah.
I never said, hey, George, what the heck happened? How did you do that? You really screwed that up, didn't you?
Mm-hmm.
It was all about strength in vulnerability. And if you think about that, how can you be vulnerable, admitting to screwing something up, and have that be a strong point? Well, you are being fully accountable and transparent. You take that into this debrief, which is so unusual, the way the Blue Angels debrief compared to the rest of the world. And we try to take that message out there to let people grow by the way we debriefed with the boss, being fully open, fully vulnerable. Now that encourages others, and it dissolves fear in the workplace. People aren't afraid to say what they had done wrong because it becomes the expectation that you'll address it and promise to fix it. And if you can't, then we talk about mentoring.
We should qualify that term fear. It dissolves the fear of retribution or fear of being judged for making a mistake. It's not going to dissolve fear of death or fear of, not pulling out quick enough on that turn around. So that's cultural fear.
When you come down to debrief, it's environmental fear, right? It's kind of environmental. It's a high, like you were in, a high consequence environment, right? There's always going to be that element of wanting to avoid things that have a bad outcome. But if you can dissolve fear in admitting to your own errors and in promising to correct them, that's when you'll do really well.
Yeah, I agree with that.
That's where the debrief, the way the Blue Angels do it, comes into great prominence and getting things done in a better fashion.
Yeah, I want to come back to the actual process of the debrief, but I just want to address this issue I have with the term vulnerability. In the Navy SEAL world, like when you're training against people who are trying to kill you, right? For you, the environment was your enemy, right? In the Blue Angels. I'm not talking about your combat career. I know that's slightly different, but in the Blue Angels. And for us, we're training. And so we were trying to close our vulnerabilities all the time. And when I talk to Navy SEALs about being vulnerable, they literally start crossing their eyes and they're like, it doesn't resonate with me. So I said, well, it's the same thing as, transparency. Like in our debrief, you have to be utterly transparent and authentic. So it's authentic to say, you know what, I screwed up, and to own it. And so I think that just for anyone who's a guy out there who's like, I don't really love that term vulnerability. I've watched Brene Brown's videos, but it doesn't resonate with me. Just change the word for transparency and authenticity. And I think we're really talking about the same thing, right?
It's vulnerability to criticism, not so much life and death vulnerability, but it's the strength you have in your personality and in your ability to say, I did this wrong, but I'm going to fix it, to recognize it and to have the awareness of it, that it's not something you go, well, I didn't know I did that. Right. Well, or
right. And also it's about the process and not the person, right? So you can say, I did this wrong without saying I'm a bad person, and we used to say, yeah, first time, no problem. Like, you fix it. If you do it a second time, okay, now this might be a personality issue, right? If you're not willing to take the steps to rectify. If it's the third time, you're off the team. Tell us about the process, the actual process of the debrief that you guys went through.
We usually got back from flying, probably a little tired, a little thirsty. We might have a soda or a sandwich and sit around the table, around the room. All the officers that were at the air show wouldn't necessarily be all 16 on the team, but could be 10 or 12. Anybody that had anything to do with making that air show happen. And I would say, as the leader, after a while, we'd kind of calm down. I'd say, okay was the key word that said we're starting the debrief. And that's when I would give my comments, promise to fix what I'd done wrong, and then everybody would go what we call around the table, get everybody's comments about what they had done wrong, and not just what they had done wrong, but praising elements of that day that went well, especially if it's individuals that did something really well. You've got to get that in there too. That was crucial. And then we would go on to dissect things with videos and comments from non-pilots about what they had seen, the maintenance officer and the doctor on the team. It was kind of cool in that regard, because if it were an aviator, if it were a pilot that said, yeah, well, you were off here and that formation looked weird, and then you'd kind of maybe want to push back based on judging the way you flew. But if it's
from your perspective,
objective observer, I mean, it worked great, and they got very, very good at it, trained at it, and did it every time we flew. So then we get those comments, and then we would just wrap it up at the end and take away what we had and try to elevate going forward what we had grown from, and getting all those answers to what had happened.
Yeah, the whole point is to come out of that with momentum and not the energy that's going to get everyone stuck, right? But you've learned, you've grown, you've kind of healed whatever kind of, like, if someone had a little self-doubt, like, oh shit, man, I really screwed up. Well, they're coming out of that meeting feeling confident in spite of their screw up. Now, that's incredible. So, how long did it take?
The debrief?
Yeah, how long would a typical debrief take?
I would say on average about an hour and 15 minutes. So we really studied hard the videos of what had happened. And you got two elements. You've got the diamond and the solo. So the four airplanes are and it's about 2/3 of the show we fly individually. So we're always putting something in front of the crowd. We bring the diamond around, we do a maneuver. We bring the solos in, they do a head-on. It looks like they're going to hit and all that stuff. Do that for about two-thirds of the way through the show. Then we join up as a sixth plane. So each element will also be studying what they've done in their individual maneuvers during that debrief, because we'll get films watching all that happen. It takes a while, but we grow from it, and it can point out things that we wouldn't have seen, we wouldn't have realized had we not seen those videos.
Right. And you're working, I know, with John Foley and your organization. Is it called Glad to Be Here, by the way? What do you call the organization where you're doing consulting and keynote stuff?
It's under John's name. It's johnfoleyinc.com, INC.
John Foley Inc. Okay. So I guess my question related to that, since you're doing that work with corporations, is have you been successful in getting the organizations you work with to appreciate the value of the debrief and to integrate debriefing into their processes? Because I think it's a game changer, personally.
It is. Many of them have. And now it kind of depends on the type of meeting. Some want infotainment, right? They want to have these legacy holding people come in and talk, and they're impressed with the personalities. Many of them want to have the lasting results of having you there. Some will do a deeper dive onto debrief to try to really put it into the organization. Procter and Gamble did that with us last fall with about 6 follow-on virtual events to talk about debrief and how to get it into the R&D department of P&G. So there are those that will embrace it. They say, "Yeah, we're going to do it. We're going to do it." Well, if they sign their emails, glad to be here. They're at the starting point of picking up on some of the stuff that we say. But it's like any other consulting you do, and I'm sure you've done it, Mark, where you go in, you go, "This is what will work for you. Give this a try," and you make an impact, and then 2 days later, gone.
Life gets in the way. Yeah.
Yeah, because it takes buy-in at the highest levels. There has to be a commitment from the boss, from the CEO or the C-suite somewhere in there, where they say, "We are going to do this. This is my expectation because we can grow from this." So, do we see it a lot? We don't see it a lot.
Yeah. It's in a sense, and I bring change theory into this, like Cotter's change model said that one of the first things you have to do in a change to affect any change in an organization is create a sense of urgency. And so the CEO, to use your terminology, has to create a high consequence, organization or a high consequence scenario around implementing some of these procedures that are going to keep the organization thriving in VUCA and relevant and not be disrupted with what's coming down the pike with AI and social change and all the things that we're seeing out there. And that's not easy when you're just going to make money, right? So how do I guess this is a good question for you again, putting your business hat on, is how can a leader who's listening shift the mindset of their culture to be a high consequence culture when they're not dealing with life and death like we were in the SEALs and you were in the Blue Angels?
One of the ways you can do it, my wife works with a consulting company out of New Jersey, a long time successful company. And what they do is they train people, they train internal people and get them certified, And I think as much as you want to talk about certification, I think sometimes that is a factor. And then not only to get them certified, they become disciples of that methodology, right? So they buy into the methodology. Now you've got somebody on site that doesn't belong to me or you. They are with that company and they've got the commitment, those agents, those disciples of what you put out there. They've got the commitment to embed this in how we do business. My wife's into problem solving, root cause analysis and these sort of things. And so that is a way to do it rather than slam bam, thank you, ma'am, out the door. That was great. And then tomorrow, yeah, that was great. And the next day, that was great. Okay, we got these problems we got to fix, and we're back to our old way of doing business. It's challenging, Mark. I don't know how.
It is challenging. Yeah.
They want to invest in it, but they don't.
How change is hard. I want to get back to the exciting stuff. Tell us about just like frame up, like the experience of like getting inspired about the Blue Angels, getting having the chutzpah to like apply. I mean, do you apply or do you get invited? What's the process look like? Let's say there was a 22-year-old young entrepreneur listening to this who's like, it's not too late for me to join the Navy and learn how to fly because I would love to be a Blue Angel someday. What's the path like for him?
I honestly think that if you go into it saying, I want to be a Blue Angel, I think you might be going in the wrong direction. I'd say
that's interesting.
Not because it's not good to be a Blue Angel. I think it's good to be. It's great. It's a great opportunity, a great honor, right? But I think the way you head into it is, I want to be a Navy pilot. I want to learn how to fly off aircraft carriers.
Be an excellent pilot first, in other words.
Yes, sir. And then later on, you can see what the chemistry is of the Blue Angels. So what the individuals are like, their humility, humble. And you can decide, is that something you want to do? And I've seen, like in the movie we made, the one young fella, Cheese, his name is call sign Cheese, I applied 3 times. So he actually applied for the team 3 times. Went to the Naval Academy, got his wings, flew F-18s, and then applied to, and he was persistent, and he won out. They did great. So you're a 22-year-old, you just graduated from college, go into the Navy wanting to be the best naval officer you can possibly be. And then see what comes around you with that. Test pilot school, that's pretty cool. If you're a great, excellent pilot and you got science in the head, which I don't, you know how to do things like that, then sure, maybe that attracts you. But I think talked to a group this morning. They said, "Well, when did you know? When did you know?" I said, "When did you want to fly?" I didn't know. I didn't. I'm the antithesis of what people want to hear. I graduated from college, and I knew I was going in the service. It was back in the days when your college deferment went away and you were going, right? And I thought, I don't mind serving. I want to serve, but I got to do something that I can learn a skill from. And then when I get done with service, how about if I go and learn how to fly airplanes so I can fly for the airlines when I get out of the Navy, as they would have it. No, I never. I didn't have a twinkle in my eye. I did it out of necessity and with a business plan, going forward. I I was different from what people think.
Well, then what led you? I know you ended up cycling through 3 times, right? You were the boss 3 times.
Yeah.
What led you to make a leap for it once you were flying planes pretty straight?
Yeah, the first time you come in 99% of the time you come in as the boss having never flown with the Blue Angels before.
Is that right? Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and what happened to me was a naval message came out. It wasn't email, but a naval message came out and said we're taking applications for flight leader of the Blues. You need to have commanded a squadron. You need 3,000 flight hours. Flying off carriers, carrier landings, all that sort of thing. Put in your application. I read that, and I kind of had I was on a ship in the ready room on an aircraft carrier where I was commanding a squadron, and I kind of spoke out loud to some of the fellows around me, the junior officers. I said, "Wouldn't that be something to lead the Blue Angels?" And I said, "Yeah, but they'd never pick me, And they said, "Come on, Skipper, you gotta give it a try. You'd be great. And besides, you'd get us front row seats at the air shows."
Of course.
So I thought, but I put on the serious part of my brain. I flipped the switch there for a second, and I thought, you know what? If it looks like something you want to do, if you never give it a chance, if you don't jump at the opportunity and give it a chance, you'll never know.
You'll never know.
Right?
You'll never know.
So I applied, and against great competition, the commanding officer of Top Gun was one of the applicants. There was a guy, Stuart Snodgrass, rest his soul, rest in peace. He was a demo pilot on the East Coast in the F-14. Had this Aryan blonde hair, and he just looked like he looked the look, right? So I went in there very relaxed. I said, "They'll never pick me," and I think being relaxed enabled me to go in front of the interview board and be very honest and just not worry about what they might want, but just say what I would say. So I got selected, and then I went away, got called back once, went away again, commanded a base in California up in the Central Valley, big Navy base, jet base, Lemoore. Got ready to retire, and they called me back again. I had to extend my retirement.
It's interesting, though. I'm drawing a parallel to Navy SEAL training itself because, not many people really think about this, but humility is one of the main things that the instructors are looking for. They're looking for their next teammate. And so the people with the big egos or make it all about them are usually the first ones to wash out of training. And they do not make the best leaders, right? The best leaders are one who put their team far before themselves, are always taking care of their team, and then you take care of your team takes care of you. It sounds like the similar situation with the Blue Angels.
It really does. We got to pick our own Blue Angels. The Bureau, what we call the Bureau, the people in Washington, didn't send you somebody and say, "This is your next Blue Angel." We asked for applicants to the team, and we'd say, and here's the prerequisites, 1,200 flight hours, 1,500, whatever it was at the time. flying off aircraft carriers, your rotation is good because now you can go to shore duty, which meant you weren't deploying, which the Blue Angels is a form of shore duty.
Kind of a joke though, because you're always gone.
You're
Right?
300 days out of the year. I mean, you're away from your family more than you are on deployments and
Right.
deployed squadron. So we say put your applications in, so we say that in about March or April, and then July is when the final selection comes. But we put your application in and see if you can get to our air shows to watch what we do.
Oh, cool. So that's the interview process. If they don't show up at the air show, they probably don't get selected.
No, it's not so much that, Mark. I hate to say it was rushing the team, but you came to the air shows as many as you could. It could have been just one or two, but we could get an impression, or it could be 4 or 5. We could get an impression about that individual. And you talked about humility, huge, huge. It's some red hot, fighter pilot, just and he's always coming to the boss to say, "Hey, boss, that was a great show today. You guys look good. How do you like it? What do you think?" We wanted to see the guys that were humble, that would talk to the E1s, the lowest enlisted in the squadron, talk to the supply officer. How does this work for you guys? How does this work for you? What do you do in the Blues? And talk to people that are watching. What do you think of the Blue Angels? And we'd get to see socially how they interacted. Were they, drinking too much? Because we just couldn't have it. And so we would get a good sense of that. Get down to what we would call the finalists that we would bring back to Pensacola in June or July usually, and we would go to social events and bring our spouses along. Now, here's where you get some really interesting clues into personality, right? Well, what did you think? And you ask your wife or your husband, what did you think of this fellow, or this gal? And they can give you, because that applicant's not really interested in making an impression on the spouse, but you could get a definite feeling on how they're going to be out there with the American public. We're on the road 300 days out of the year with each other 300 days out of the year. So we had to have compatibility, and we had to have humility. And you're taking the best of the best that have huge egos, likely, but how do they control that? And that's what we needed to see. And that's how we selected people. And it was about 98% accurate and good and worked.
That's interesting. Is it a 2-year tour duty, roughly? It seems like that from the movie that I watched here.
Sure.
The one you produced.
From the flying standpoint, and even the other ground jobs, it was 2 years because of the separation.
That's incredible. You think all of that training, and they would keep them around for a little longer?
Well, we're worried about complacency. And we worried about losing that edge, the edge of still being sincerely honored to meet people and to take the label that you had and use it in a very positive way. The Blue Angel label, right? That you're just a guy that came from the fleet, gets to do this, fly Blue Jets for 2 years, and is going to go back to the fleet. We wanted that joy, that glad to be here spirit to still be there. After 2 years, it's a grueling schedule. After 2 years, that might go away, and we didn't want that.
Right. And I love that idea of never complacency, because during that 2 years, there's not a moment where you don't think you can improve. And at the end of that 2 years, there's still a lot of improvement that you probably see in yourself, but then it's diminishing returns. And so you don't want to get to that point where you're going down the other side of that slope. And all of a sudden you're like, well, I think I've got this, right? Because the moment you think you got it, that's when bad things happen.
Look out. Yeah. I like what Vince Lombardi said. I'm sure you've heard this quote many times, but gentlemen, we're going to go out there today, and we're going to go out there every day, and we're going to seek perfection. We'll never find perfection, but along the way, we'll experience excellence. And that's what the Blue, never perfect. And so just like you said, Mark, you're always looking for the way to make that next step to improvement. One of the guys in the movie had a great saying. So once you think you've gotten to a point where you got it, you look at it again and you go, you're so far away from getting it, from perfecting it. And it gives you the chance to really be honest about it.
Right. And that brings it back to the debrief, why that's so important, because you can't see what you can't see from your perspective. Right. And so you may think, oh shit, I just nailed it. And you get the perspective from your wingman. It's like, no, you didn't nail it, man. Or the ground person.
Yeah, from the ground person. From your wingmen kind of expect you to expose everything that you know. Now, if you didn't see it, maybe your wingman didn't see it, but it's unlikely your wingman's going to comment on it unless it was an intentional avoidance, which I only saw twice in my 4 years of leading. I only saw it twice where somebody wasn't forthcoming about something that was blatantly obvious and a negative.
Right. It just occurred to me, Greg, that the corollary to what we're talking about in the corporate world is the 360, right? And organizations that do frequent 360s, where they're getting the perspective of their bosses, their subordinates, their peers, and they're taking it seriously, and they're taking corrective action, because sometimes that's brutal. I remember the first time I did a 360, I was like getting hit over the head with a 2x4. But not many people do that. Back to our comment earlier about people, executives are, there's so many demands on their time, and everything seems to be moving so fast that they're like, oh, we don't have time to do that. Or they plan to do it and then it just never gets done. But it's one of the most important things, I think, for developing leaders and developing teams, is getting that objective feedback.
There's a time in there where the debrief is one of those areas where we don't have time to do that, and we teach as we drill down deeper. We teach how you can do a debrief, and it's not going to be you don't need to do a Blue Angel debrief. It can be a 2-minute debrief, like we got started at FedEx when I was flying there. We had some hull losses, and it was time to figure out what's going on, how come. And I realized we get to an overnight flight where you fly in the mail into the packages into Memphis and then back out, landing at 4 or 5 in the morning. The last thing you want to do is have an analysis of the flight. You want to get in the hotel van, get in there, make it seem like nighttime for about 6 hours, and try to sleep in the daytime. We never gathered good ideas from the debrief, and we finally got it to where and put it on the FAA checklist, got it on there where the captain would, before we left the cockpit, the captain would say, okay, let's debrief, because it's on the checklist, and it takes 2 minutes max. I was off by 100 feet on this one pass or this one approach, but I can fix it, the captain says. And over to you, first officer or second officer back in the day. They get to talk about what they saw, but and I was off by 100 feet because of the distraction of something, right? And you learn from it and you grow from it. And if you can't capture that with some sort of a debrief, it doesn't have to be a Blue Angel debrief, but the fact of debriefing with an attitude of self-revelation rather than, hey, you were way off on that one. That's screwed up, man. That's when people close off.
Shuts people down, right?
Right. We talk about that vulnerability. It totally goes away, and that fear. The fear jumps in there to take over from learning the right answers.
We've talked about the debrief, but I think equally as important is the brief. In the movie, there's some really compelling scenes of the brief and the visualization that's going on. Everyone visualizing their role, and even you as the boss. It wasn't you, but the boss in the movie. Cueing the movements. When you're gonna like juke left or right or up, down. I don't know. It was fascinating. So tell us about the brief and how you develop those visualization skills and the significance of them.
Sure. Back when I led the team, I briefed each and every maneuver just like that, with guys with their eyes closed, visualizing, listening to my voice, because what happens there to develop the trust is a consistency, and that consistency is in the cadence. So something like, I don't know if any of the viewers or listeners can see my hands, but something like the lead and a wingman, I would say something like coming left, okay. And on the K and K, my right wingman would know I was turning, and he would start turning into me. That cadence was established. And that's what they're looking at with their eyes closed, with visualization. When the leader, and even in the movie, when they chair fly one of those maneuvers, they're thinking about, okay, this is what's happening, listening to the voice and the cadence in that ready room in that recital, if you want to call it that, is exactly what they'll hear in flight. So they can go, come on left, okay, and start turning. If I don't honor that, if I'm not consistent, don't start turning exactly on the K and K, the chance is going to get pretty darn close, right? So that's the
the boss in the movie would use rip it, and he kind of roll the R like rip it. So what you're suggesting is there is a point where they know in that rip, right? It's probably right when he hits their ip, that's when he's turning or something like that.
Absolutely. It's so crucial to have it exactly the same place each and every time. The profile roll rates, all that stuff has to be just so perfected.
When it comes to the skill of visualizing itself, now that's a unique skill. I imagine, really good pilots kind of develop that. They get taught it. Maybe I don't know when, if it's formally taught, but how do we develop that skill, and what's the significance for corporate leaders to develop the skill of visualization?
Don't they say that sometimes it takes, like the Beatles, they played together, and they played in Germany, I think, but they played 3 or 4 times a night. It takes it's either 1,000 or 10,000 repetitions of doing something to get it to be the best at it. As far as visualization goes, I never used it in the Navy until I got to the Blue Angels. I never saw it. Yeah,
That's curious.
It's something where you're coordinating with another airplane. I think more than anything else. It's like, but I guess I could have used it coming aboard the ship, visualizing how that approach was going to be with the beat ball, the landing aid down there, and the ship and the flight deck moving away from you on an angle as you're trying to get into land. I could have visualized that, but I frankly, I didn't use it till I got to the Blue Angels.
It's interesting. I teach this now to NSW guys, SEALs, and part of the reason is that it's combat is messy, right? And the end result can look very different than expected and still be acceptable. And so it's important that everyone has the same general imagery in their mind about what's going to happen along the way, what to do when the contingencies need to be executed because the helicopter went down or the secondary insertion is compromised or whatever, and what's the acceptable vision for victory look like, right? And so we visualize, we call it dirt diving, a lot of our missions, and we visualize our individual roles and the team role, and we use a lot of video and imagery when we brief. So I think that there's some of that was kind of informally being done probably in the ready rooms because you use a lot of imagery, all the military does in their mission planning and their preparation.
Well, I think in air combat, dogfighting, you go, okay, what am I going to do if he pulls straight up rather than continues to do horizontal work? What am I going to do? It's just thinking ahead and being ready.
You have to anticipate the OODA loop, right? Well, I think there's a big opportunity there for organizations and organizational leaders to learn from the brief and the debrief, and to begin to integrate this kind of anticipatory mental imagining, because it's really useful, in my opinion. Anyways, I found it to be extraordinarily useful.
I think the first I ever heard of visualizing was golfers visualizing a putt, looking at the contour of the green and going, okay, I see the ball going that way. I see visualizing before they actually took the putter stroke. I think that was the first I'd ever heard of, and it's been around. The term has been around for a long time, but how you use it.
I noticed, a couple other similarities, right? I'm a big advocate of breath control training for stress management, arousal control, getting to that mental clarity so that you're not, you don't have this constant chatter, monkey mind. And breath control is very useful for that. And it seemed to me like in the beginning when you just check in and they put you through that, whatever that gyroscope thing is, and you don't have
the centrifuge.
Yeah, the centrifuge, and you don't have your G suit on. And so they're cueing them to breathe and to control the breath and to hold the breath and to contract the muscles. There's a lot of similarities there. And I imagine that dialogue and that training continues on until it becomes second nature. Am I right?
Certainly. Yes, sir. But you know what it is too, Mark? It's training to the high G's you're going to experience You don't actually ever visualize it. You just know I've got to start grunting and groaning now. Grunting.
Yeah, no, I don't mean visualizing. I mean greasing the groove of knowing when to do it and appreciating the value of doing that, right? And I imagine there's a lot of breath control going on as you're preparing to enter the cockpit, and of course going through your procedures. And I love the very formality of everyone, walking in the very, very tight formations and saluting their crews. That's just beautiful. But all of that ritual is all about stress management too. It's not just to look good for the crowds.
That's an excellent point, and part of the stress management is supporting each other. I know I'd had flights where one of the wingmen was having a lousy day, and I'd say, okay, we're behind the crowd setting up the diamond roll, and they'd check in with their call sign, and you could hear in that person's voice that they were starting
Just
down.
fraying at the seams. Yeah.
Yeah, and you could sense their frustration, and then it was incumbent upon me to say, okay, we're behind the crowd setting up the diamond roll to show that I'm pretty darn happy. I'm okay with what's going on. I want them to take, and we would talk about that pre-event occasionally. We'd say, look, if you have a bad maneuver, put it behind you. Don't carry it with you. Throw it away. We'll talk about it when we come back, because we can't let our performance and what happened a few minutes ago impact what's going to happen coming up, because those maneuvers that you've got coming up are demanding. And if you let something weigh on you and your attitude goes down, you go, oh, I'm crappy, I can't do this. I'm the worst pilot they ever had. No, that's and
Not
that
good. Yeah.
and a big point there too is that as a leader, it's incumbent upon you to say, I need to pick this guy up. I need to make sure he knows that we're not mad at him. We don't dislike him. We know he's working his best, and that'll come out in the debrief, of course, too. But
No, I think that's spot on. I love that because we call it feeding the courage wolf. If you start feeding the fear wolf, then you're going to drag yourself down. Your body's going to get weaker. Your confidence is going to go south, and that'll infect the rest of the team. So it's incumbent upon the leader, or if the leader doesn't notice it, whoever notices it, to be like, okay, interdict that. Let's get this guy back on track, because otherwise everyone's affected by that negative attitude.
love you, buddy. Let's go. Come on, we
Let's
love
go.
you.
Yeah, we got this. Come on. One last pass. Easy day. Tell us about, like John was telling me, like at the beginning of the season, maybe it's when you're out at Fallon and starting to do the work together, like you're like feet apart in the formations, but at the end of the season, you're like inches apart. Tell us how that works and what those, how razor close you guys actually are when you're flying at Mach whatever, or
We
400
come out
miles an hour.
about 400. 400 is about an average speed, 400 miles an hour.
Is that right?
3 something in knots indicated. Uh, we come out of winter training, those 10 weeks, twice a day, every day for 10 weeks, and we're down to like where we can do 3 feet pretty comfortably. And then as we go through the season and that skill improves, but probably more importantly than the skill is the trust. Because the skill improves, we now start to trust each other. We see that cadence being exactly right. Come on, okay, on the in K, everybody knows it's going to happen. They trust the lead. They trust each other, and that's how we refine it. We can refine it down to 18 inches. That's about mid-season if things are going right. We always have the option to go, all right, that was a little rough today at 18 inches. Let's move it back out to 2 or 3 feet, right? So that's always there. You're not held to it necessarily.
Can I ask you, sorry to interrupt, how do you know how far apart? Like, how do you tell that you're 18 versus 36?
It's where you put your visual cues. Like if you're looking at where the wingtip hits a certain letter on the fuselage and how and where that lies, there's ways you can use visual cues to move it in closer. Like they talk about in the movie, the Yankee set. Well, Yankee, as you know phonetically, that's what you call a Y, is A B C D Alpha Bravo Charlie Delta. With the Y under the wing, under let's say my wing is the lead, the Y is the last letter in Navy, right? The last letter in Navy is Y. He'll drive up and put his nose right under that Y, and that Y is where in the movie you come out with the term, and where in real life in the blues they call it the Yankee set. And will we ever get there? And like one of the pilots in the movie says, some squadron, some blues teams never get there, and some
And
do.
is that 18 inches or is that closer?
12 inches. 12 inches.
That's
We
12
never
inches.
we never used to advertise 12, but now they say it. We're 12 inches apart, and that's what the Yankee set does for you. Not only are you 12 inches apart this way, I mean your airplanes are just overlapping. Like the wings are overlapping like crazy.
Hi, Mark Devine here from SealFit. After 2 years of development, I'm super stoked to announce the launch of SealFit supplements and our first product, SealFit Electro Greens. This is the highest quality organic greens you can find, combined with electrolytes into one powerful supplement. Take with 8 ounces of water in the morning or add to your smoothie to get your day kicked off with the proper nutritional supplementation and hydration support. And you can also use it as a pick-me-up booster during the day or after a workout. It dissolves immediately, and believe it or not, it tastes great. I've had many testimonials already saying it's the best tasting greens that they have ever tried. So hoo-yah, SealFitSupplements.com, or you can find it on Amazon by searching for SealFit Electro Greens. Hoo-yah. Let's do this. Divine out. That is delicious. Do you have to have like perfect weather for that? Because I can imagine if you had a wind shear or some sort of turbulence that would be dangerous.
You need it where it's not extreme turbulence, and great question, because when there is turbulence, it's incumbent upon the leader, and when I was there in my case, to have the turbulence hit you and not react. If it pushed your airplane up a little bit from an updraft, you don't push the nose back over. You just hold what you got. Don't flinch. One of the things I like to say is hold what you got, don't flinch. Hold what you got. Pretty soon it'll settle back down. But I'm not, as a lead, I can't react to the turbulence. I just have to let it push me where it goes, because we're so close together. We're all going to get pushed that same amount. If I try to fight it, now we're just making it hugely complex to do it. So yes, you can fly in turbulence. Now, if it's really, really, really rough, then we say, okay, 3 feet apart today, no closer, no 18 inches, no 12 inches, right? We're just going to honor that turbulence because we just can't control it.
It's fascinating. We got to wrap this up. I've been already kept you a little bit longer than I promised you I would. But tell us about the movie. How did it come about? And was it fun to make? What was that like? And what's happening next for you?
I learned a lot. So 5 years ago, almost to the month, I said to Rob Stone, who had made Blue Angels Around the World at the Speed of Sound, an award-winning documentary from the 90s that a lot of our clips are from. I said, Rob, it's time to make another documentary, and let's go out, because we're coming up on the 75th anniversary of the blues. Let's go out and get it done, and we're going to go small ball. Let's get Boeing involved, USA involved, Southwest Airlines, the usual suspects that love us, love the military, and of course Boeing, who makes the jets, right? And just we'll see if we can get $1 million and put this together, and we'll have a good documentary. And that was going well until the pandemic hit, and then it was time. Then nothing happens. But I found Kevin LaRosa through another avenue, who was the aerial coordinator of Top Gun Maverick, the best in Hollywood, flies civilian airplanes around the military stuff and does a great job. And he said, hey, what are you doing? What are you up to? I said, I'm trying to make this movie. He said, okay. Glenn Powell, who Kevin had worked with on Top Gun Maverick, Hangman on Top Gun Maverick, loves the Blue Angels. He had a Blue Angel poster in his bedroom wall growing up. He said, let me hook you up with him. Hooked me up with him. He got us to Creative Artists Agency, CAA, the best in LA. And we found a producer who turned out to be Bad Robot, who's, Hannah Mangala runs film there, and it's owned by J.J. Abrams, right? So J.J.'s a pilot, and he loved the idea. So they said, we want to produce it. And then we found John Turner at IMAX, the VP of documentary. He said, well, I want to make a feature-length film documentary style, first time ever. and I want to take the power of the Blue Angels, the force of them, and the power of IMAX, put them together, and that's how we got started. We went into and got the Navy to buy in, which is tough.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you if they played along. They must have, because
I think you've seen that in special warfare. It's hard to get the Navy to say, okay, you can embed, because the Navy wants to see an outcome. In their minds, I think, recruiting. They want to see something that'll come positive out of what you're doing. Convinced them, and we started into production. And we got the best in Hollywood, a great cinematographer. Uh, uh, Paul Crowder, Britt, was our director. He was awesome. He's got a couple of awards. And Glenn Zipper was the conduit to Bad Robot. So we got a lot of great people. Worked on it for the 2022 season. Hoped to get it out in 23 on IMAX. And that slid a little bit. There was some elements there that caused that. And we finally got it out in this year in about May for about a week in IMAX. But prior to that, 6 months prior to that, Amazon bought the rights to it. And they wanted to stream it on Memorial Day. So we showed it in theaters for about a week. And then Amazon took it and ran with it. And just it became the number one movie on Amazon, on Prime, which is pretty.
Is that right? Oh, that's cool.
And Rotten Tomatoes rated it 98% viewer approval, which is almost unheard of. So it really took off, and it's been a great product for Amazon Prime.
So a lot of the aerial scenes are new.
Yes. Oh, absolutely.
And how do they get those? Like, how do they get them?
With a helicopter.
Helicopter.
A lot of that, and then great cameras within the cockpit, and we actually attach cameras underneath another F-18 cameras in a big container, if you will, to film Sony Venice cameras to film a lot of what was going on. So we use.
So that bird would fly next to the formation or underneath it to capture it, or how did that work?
Nearby, yeah. It wasn't part of the formation because of the drag involved. We couldn't do that and the interference. So, and it was budget. It was a small budget. It was, $6 or $7 million compared to $235 million to make Top Gun Maverick. You can do that when you don't have to build sets and pay actors. It was just great.
Was it financially lucrative? I mean, was there a return on investment?
I don't know the answer to that, Mark. I didn't get involved with the business end other than, a contract to be an executive producer and be a part of that. But it wasn't. Documentaries don't make a lot of money.
It's not why you did it. Yeah, of course. Yeah.
I think I did it because America needed a boost, right? We needed.
I agree with that. Yeah.
Bring it together a little bit. That was, nothing more American flag, apple pie, mom, and all that than the Blue Angels. I mean, really, America's team. So I thought, we need to do this and bring something to put smiles on faces, and I feel like we did a pretty good job of that.
Yeah, you did. Well done, sir. Well, what's next for you as we wrap up here?
Oh boy, I'm still doing public speaking, which I just love. I've found some spirituality parts of my life that had been missing, and that's been really rewarding for me, and changed the way I believe and what happens and how it happens. So that's been huge, and in fact, I even talk a little bit in that area too, which is very personally rewarding. So I do that, and we may try to do some more production stuff. We'll see. I've learned this Hollywood stuff, and it's pretty cool. One of the things I want to mention was, us outsiders from that world, we think, oh, what a bunch of crackpots and nutheads. No, those folks they work their tails off.
Yeah, they're hardworking.
Extraordinarily professional, and they work really, really well, and they know how to build teams, and they know how to do all that. So that was a wonderful takeaway from being involved with movie production.
Yeah, that's good to hear. I'm glad you brought that up. I've had some experience with my company and training, individuals who are going to go play like SEAL roles, and whatnot. And I've always found them to be very professional and hardworking, and contrary to what a lot of people think about Hollywood. Right. Some brilliant people there.
That's great. Yes, sir. Agree.
Greg, you've been amazing. I appreciate your service. Just very inspirational. And thanks for putting that movie out. I agree. It's like a big boost. Like we we're living through some crazy times, like the Chinese proverb, may we live in interesting times. It's good to have a spiritual center, in times like this. So keep doing that work too.
Mark, you thanks for what you do. I mean, you reach thousands and thousands of people with good news and good ideas and good words and wisdom.
Yeah. Well, it's like we've got to put the light out there because there's a lot of darkness in the world too.
Absolutely. I agree.
So the only way to dispel the darkness is with the light.
Yeah.
Sir, it's been an amazing conversation. Again, I appreciate you, and I hope to meet you in person someday soon.
I hope so too, Mark. Thank you.
Give my best to John.
Yep. I will. And glad to be here.
Glad to be here. Hoo-yah.
There you go. Hoo-yah.
Hoo-yah.
Thanks, Mark.
Wow, what a fascinating conversation with Greg Wooldridge, the boss, Blue Angel. Unbelievable story. And wow, just the intensity of that job. Go check out the show, Blue Angels, on Amazon. It's amazing. I watched it myself last night, and you won't be disappointed. It's really phenomenal. Shout out to my incredible team, Catherine Devine and Streamline Media and Jet Studios, who work behind the scenes to bring you the show and my newsletter every week. Speaking of the newsletter, Divine Inspiration comes out every Tuesday. You can go to my website, markdivine.com, to subscribe. Also, the YouTube video was on my YouTube. You can link there from my Mark Divine site, and the show notes from the show will be there as well. You can reach out to me on Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook at Mark Divine or at Real Mark Divine. And if you want to send me some ideas for guests or any questions you might have that I can hit up in a solo podcast, reach out on my LinkedIn profile. Certainly helps to have you rate and review the show wherever you listen. It's very helpful for visibility and credibility. Shooting for 5,000 plus 5-star reviews. Please help and keep us relevant and motivated by doing that. I appreciate it. So thanks again for listening. Thanks for being part of the change you want to see in the world. And thanks for doing the work. Till next time, Divine out. Hoo-yah.